225 denarii. That's what a Roman legionary earned per year under Augustus. Sounds like a respectable wage for the most powerful army in the ancient world. But here's what they don't tell you. After deductions for food, clothing, equipment, and shared expenses, the average soldier kept maybe 75 to 100 denarii in cash. 1/3 of the official salary. That's it. With that money, a legionary could buy roughly 1,000 to 1,500 loaves of bread per year, or 2 to 3 months of decent wine, or half a slave if he saved for 2 years. Meanwhile, his centurion, the officer commanding 80 men, earned 1,500 to 3,600 denarii annually, 16 times more than the men he commanded. If you think modern military pay gaps are bad, wait until you see what Roman soldiers actually earned versus what their officers took home. Welcome to Past Chronicles, where history, economics, and power collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Let's set the stage. We're talking about the Roman Imperial Army, specifically the legions from Augustus through the 3rd century CE. This is after the chaos of the late Republic, when generals like Marius, Sulla, Pompey, and Caesar paid their soldiers through plunder and promises. Augustus professionalized everything. Fixed terms of service, 16 years active duty, later extended to 25. Fixed retirement benefits, and most importantly, fixed pay. Regular stipendium, that's the Latin term for military salary, paid 3 times per year in January, May, and September. This wasn't approximate. This wasn't variable, based on your commander's generosity. This was systematic. The Roman state paid its soldiers like clockwork. That regularity was revolutionary. But systematic doesn't mean generous. And as we'll see, the official numbers tell only part of the story. The real question isn't what soldiers earned on paper. It's what they actually kept in their purses after the Roman military's extensive deduction system took its cut. This isn't speculation. The numbers survive in ancient sources, military discharge papers, and most importantly, in the soldiers' own complaints recorded by historians like Tacitus. Most documentaries about Roman legions focus on tactics, armor, famous battles. They'll tell you about the pilum, the gladius, the testudo formation. But they won't tell you what it cost to be a legionary. What the economic reality actually looked like for the men who built Rome's empire. Because, when you look at the money, really look at it, the picture changes. The Roman army wasn't just a military institution. It was an economic system, a massive employer, a social mobility ladder for some, a financial trap for others. And the pay structure reflected exactly who Rome valued and who Rome considered expendable. But to understand what Roman soldiers could actually afford, what their lives looked like economically, we need to follow the denarii, from the imperial treasury to the soldier's purse, and see what disappeared along the way. The Roman military pay system, as we know it, began with Julius Caesar. During his Gallic campaigns in the 50s BCE, Caesar doubled legionary pay from 5 to 10 asses per day. That works out to 225 denarii per year. It was a calculated move. Caesar needed loyal soldiers, and money bought loyalty. When Augustus became emperor, he kept Caesar's pay rate, 225 denarii annually for a standard legionary. And here's the critical detail. That rate remained unchanged for nearly a century. From Augustus's reign beginning in 27 BCE until Emperor Domitian's increase in 83 CE, legionary base pay stayed frozen at 225 denarii, nearly 100 years, no raises, no cost of living adjustments. Meanwhile, prices fluctuated, inflation crept in, and the soldiers noticed. According to military pay records, Caesar doubled the pay from 5 to 10 asses per day. equal to 225 denarii per year. Legionary pay remained unchanged until the period of Emperor Domitian. 100 years of frozen wages. Think about that. Augustus ruled from 27 BCE to 14 CE, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, the year of 4 emperors, Vespasian, Titus all kept the same pay rate. It wasn't until Domitian that anyone bothered to give the legions a raise. But even that 225 denarii wasn't take-home pay. Far from it. The Roman military operated on a deduction system. Your official salary existed mostly on paper. What you actually received in your purse was significantly less. The deductions were systematic. Food, your daily grain ration, the wine, the oil, clothing, your tunic, your cloak, your boots, equipment, weapons, armor, replacement gear, when things broke, tent and camping supplies shared by your contubernium, the 8-man squad you lived and fought with, cookpots, handmills for grinding grain, pack animals, maintenance of communal equipment, contributions to burial clubs, essentially life insurance. So, if you died, your squad could afford to bury you properly and send money home to your family. All of it came out of your pay, before you ever saw a coin. The ancient historian Tacitus recorded soldiers' complaints during the mutiny of 14 CE, the year Augustus died. Here's what the soldiers said: one's soul and body are valued at 10 asses a day. And with these one must pay for clothing, weapons, tents, as well as to save oneself from the abuse of the centurions, or to buy some exemption from some toil. 10 asses per day was their gross pay. But they had to buy everything from it, including, apparently, bribes to avoid extra work details. So what did a legionary actually keep? The sources vary, but the consensus among historians is that deductions consumed roughly 2/3 of a soldier's pay. That means out of 225 denarii annually, a legionary saw perhaps 75 to 100 denarii in actual cash, 1/3. That's your take-home. But let's be precise about what that money represented. Remember, food, shelter, and basic equipment were already covered. You weren't paying rent. You weren't buying groceries in the market. The army provided those necessities. The 75 to 100 denarii you kept was for everything else. Personal items, luxuries, savings, sending money home to family, paying for prostitutes, wine beyond your ration, gambling, the traditional ways soldiers spent their free time. For context, a skilled craftsman in Rome, a carpenter, a baker, a mason earned around 40 to 50 denarii per day, according to Diocletian's later price edict. That's 14,000 to 18,000 denarii per year. Of course, they had to pay for their own food, housing, and tools. Still, the comparison is stark. A legionary's cash income was roughly 1% of what a skilled civilian earned. But the legionary got food and housing. The tradesman didn't. Different economic models. Hard to compare directly, but it gives you perspective. And here's where the system gets interesting. Because not everyone in the Roman army earned 225 denarii. The pay structure was deeply hierarchical. Praetorian guards, the emperor's elite bodyguards, stationed in Roman ed 750 denarii per year. More than triple what legionaries made. After Domitian's raise, Praetorians earned 1,000 denarii. They also had shorter service terms, better conditions, and lived in the capital instead of some miserable frontier fort. Cavalry units earned more than infantry. Auxiliary soldiers, non-citizens, recruited from the provinces, started at around 100 denarii per year. Half of what citizens in the legions earned, but auxiliaries got Roman citizenship upon discharge, which was economically valuable. Then there were the specialists. The aquilifer, who carried the eagle's standard, the signifer, who carried the century's standard, and managed the unit's savings bank. Principal specialists like engineers, medics, clerk, earned 450 denarii under Domitian, and centurions. Centurions were in a different financial universe entirely. A centurion commanded a century, nominally 100 men, though usually closer to 80 in practice. There were 60 centuries in a legion, 60 centurions, and they earned dramatically more than the men they commanded. Under Domitian, when legionaries earned 300 denarii per year, centurions earned at minimum 1,800 denarii. That's 6 times more. But it scaled up dramatically based on rank. Senior centurions earned much more. The Primi-Ordens, the first cohort centurions, earned double that, and the Primus Pilus, the senior centurion of the entire legion, earned somewhere between 15,000 and 60,000 denarii per year, depending on which ancient source you believe. Let's use the conservative estimate. 15,000 denarii. That's 50 times what a legionary earned. For commanding the same type of soldiers, doing functionally similar work, just with more authority. Sound familiar? It should. Roman centurions were the professional military class. They stayed in service for decades, accumulated wealth, invested in land and slaves. Meanwhile, ordinary legionaries served their 25 years, got their discharge bonus, and if they were lucky, bought a small farm. The wealth gap wasn't just about pay. Centurions received larger shares of plunder, better retirement benefits, social status that opened business opportunities. The system was designed to create a professional officer class and keep ordinary soldiers financially dependent. Today, a U.S. Army private earns about $25,000 per year. A colonel earns around $110,000. That's 4.4 times more. Roman centurions earned 6 to 50 times more than their soldiers. The modern military actually compressed the pay gap. Rome's was far more extreme. So what could a legionary actually buy with his 75 to 100 denarii of annual cash income? Let's go shopping in ancient Rome. Bread, the staple of the Roman diet. In the early empire, a loaf cost about 2 asses, that's 1/8 of a denarius. So 100 denarii bought you 800 loaves of bread, enough to feed yourself for over 2 years if you ate nothing but bread. Of course, the army already provided bread rations, so this is just for comparison wine. A sisterus, about half a liter of decent wine, costs 16 to 24 denarii. According to Diocletian's price edict, 100 denarii bought you 4 to 6 liters of good wine. Not much. You'd drink through that in a week if you were a typical Roman soldier. Clothing, a tunic, cost around 15 sesterces, about 4 denarii. A pair of military boots, slightly more, call it 20 denarii, for a good pair. With 100 denarii, you could buy 5 sets of civilian clothes. Useful if you were saving for retirement and wanted a wardrobe for civilian life. Slaves. This is where it gets interesting. A young, unskilled slave cost around 200 to 400 denarii. An agricultural worker, 600 denarii. With 100 denarii per year, you'd need to save for 2 to 3 years just to afford one basic slave. But if you did, that slave was an investment. You could rent them out for labor and generate income. Here's what that meant in practice. A Roman legionary wasn't poor, exactly. He had guaranteed food and shelter. He wasn't going to starve, but he also wasn't accumulating wealth during his service. His cash income was barely enough for modest luxuries and small savings. If he wanted to send money home to support his family, and many did that, came from his 75 to 100 denarii. If he wanted to save for retirement, same pot of money. If he wanted to drink, gamble, or visit brothels, and Roman soldiers absolutely did all three, that was also coming from his limited cash. Most soldiers lived paycheck to paycheck. The 3 annual payments meant you got a lump sum every 4 months, which you had to budget carefully. Run out of money in month 3? Too bad, wait until the next payday. The real economic opportunity came from 3 sources. First, bonuses. Emperors frequently gave donative or special cash payments to secure loyalty, especially upon succession. Those could equal a year's salary or more. Second, plunder. If your legion sacked a city, you got a share. Could be enormous if you were lucky. Third, the retirement bonus. The retirement bonus was the real prize. After 25 years of service, a legionary received 3,000 denarii, later raised to 5,000. That was substantial wealth. Enough to buy land, set up a business, live comfortably for years. But you had to survive 25 years first. Remember, legionary pay stayed frozen at 225 denarii for nearly a century. Domitian was the first emperor to raise it, adding a 4th payment to bring the annual total to 300 denarii. That's a 33% increase. Significant, but it wasn't generosity. Domitian needed the army's loyalty. He was facing potential coups. Money bought allegiance. And 300 denarii was still modest compared to what centurions and praetorians earned. The next major increase came under Septimius Severus. Around 197 CE, he raised legionary pay to roughly 400 to 600 denarii, depending on which ancient source you trust. Again, not generosity. Severus had fought a civil war to become emperor. He knew the military was the source of imperial power. He paid them accordingly. Caracalla raised it further to around 900 denarii. Each successive emperor understood the same lesson. Soldiers make or break emperors. Pay them well, or they'll support someone else. But with each pay increase came inflation. The Roman government debased the currency to afford the raises. The denarius went from nearly pure silver under Augustus to less than 50% silver by Caracalla's reign. So the nominal pay increased, but purchasing power didn't keep pace. It's the same pattern you see in every empire. Increase military spending, debase the currency to pay for it. Watch inflation eat away the value. Repeat. So how did the Roman military maintain this system? The trick is simple. Pay soldiers just enough to keep them loyal, but not enough to make them independent. Deduct most of their salary for necessities they can't opt out of. Create a massive pay gap between officers and enlisted. Then dangle the retirement bonus as the reward that keeps them serving, despite poor conditions. It's a classic control mechanism. You're not starving, you're not desperate, but you're also not wealthy enough to leave. The system keeps you dependent. And if you stay loyal for 25 years, you get the big payout. But here's the key. Most soldiers didn't think of themselves as exploited. They had steady employment, which was rare in the ancient world. They had food security. They had social status. Being a Roman legionary meant something. And compared to peasants or day laborers, they were doing okay. The Roman military didn't need to pay well by modern standards. It just needed to pay better than the alternatives. According to research on Roman soldier salaries were relatively high compared to farmers or commoners. But only about 1/3 of the total amount was paid out directly, as 2/3 was deducted for their own upkeep: clothing, weapons, food, and animal fodder. 2/3 deducted, 1/3 kept. That ratio held across the imperial period. It wasn't a secret. Soldiers knew. But what choice did they have? For centurions and senior officers, the system was fantastic. High pay, social prestige, opportunities for corruption. They could demand bribes from subordinates, skim from unit funds, profit from supply contracts. Many centurions retired wealthy. For ordinary legionaries, the system was survival. You served your time, saved what you could, hoped for a good retirement bonus, and prayed you didn't die in some miserable Germanic forest 20 years in. Same pattern as any large organization. The people at the top do great. The people at the bottom get by. And everyone in between tells themselves they're doing fine because they could be worse off. But let's talk about that retirement bonus, because it was genuinely significant. Augustus established the Aerarium Militari, the military treasury specifically, to fund veteran payments. He seeded it with 170 million sesterces, 42 million denarii, from his personal fortune. It was funded by specific taxes, a 1% sales tax and a 5% inheritance tax. Veterans received 3,000 denarii upon discharge, later increased to 5,000 under Caracalla. That's 10 to 16 years' worth of a legionary's gross salary, or 30 to 50 years' worth of their actual cash income. With 3,000 to 5,000 denarii, a veteran could buy substantial farmland, or set up a workshop, or invest in rental properties, or buy several slaves and start a business. It was real wealth. This created an incentive structure. Serve 25 years, survive the wars, the diseases, the accidents, and you get financial security for life. The Roman state essentially deferred most of your compensation until the end. Modern militaries do something similar with pensions. Stay for 20 years, get lifetime benefits, leave early, get nothing. It locks you into the system. The Roman version was more explicit. Here's 25% of what we should have paid you over your career, all at once. Now go be a productive veteran and don't cause trouble. So why did soldiers accept this? Why didn't Roman legions mutiny more often, overpay? Because for most recruits, military service was still their best economic option. If you were a landless peasant from rural Italy or the provinces, what were your alternatives? Agricultural labor for subsistence wages. Maybe urban labor in Rome, competing for jobs with slaves. Begging. Banditry. The legion offered regular pay, food, shelter, medical care, and a path to citizenship, if you were an auxiliary. Plus, the real money came from bonuses and plunder. When your legion sacked a city, you might capture more in one day than you'd earn in 10 years of regular pay. The historian Polybius recorded that Scipio Africanus's soldiers each received about 40 pounds of silver after the siege of New Carthage in 209 BCE. That's far more than a year's salary, and it was tax-free. Emperors understood this. They used donativa strategically. When Tiberius died in 14 CE, Augustus's will promised legionaries 75 denarii, each about 3 months' gross pay, or nearly a year's cash pay. When Claudius became emperor after Caligula's assassination in 41 CE, he promised praetorians 5,000 denarii each, 5 years' salary just for supporting his claim to the throne. Money bought loyalty. Regular pay kept you alive. Bonuses made you rich. Retirement pay secured your future. As long as Rome kept winning wars and emperors kept bribing soldiers, the system worked. But when Rome stopped expanding and plunder dried up, the economic model began to break. What makes this dangerous today is that modern militaries follow similar patterns. The compensation structures have changed, but the underlying logic hasn't. U.S. military enlisted pay starts around $25,000 per year. Housing and food are provided or subsidized. After deductions for taxes and mandatory expenses, take-home pay is roughly half. Sound familiar? Officers earn dramatically more. A colonel earns 4 to 5 times what a private makes. A general earns more than 20 times what a private makes. The pay gap is less extreme than Rome's, but it's still substantial. And the modern military uses the same retirement incentive. Serve 20 years, get pension and benefits for life. Leave earlier, get almost nothing. It locks you into the system the same way Rome's retirement bonus did. According to Diocletian's price edict, blue-collar workers, shepherds, mule drivers, and sewage cleaners could only earn 20 to 25 denarii per day. For this amount, they could buy about 600 grams of pork. Context matters. Roman soldiers earned less than skilled tradesmen, but more than unskilled laborers. Modern soldiers earn less than skilled tradesmen, but more than minimum wage workers. The relative position hasn't changed in 2,000 years. But there's a critical difference. Roman soldiers could get rich from plunder and imperial bonuses. Modern soldiers don't capture enemy treasuries. They don't loot cities. The only people getting rich from modern wars are defense contractors. A U.S. private deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan earned around $35,000 to $40,000 per year with hazard pay. A defense contractor doing similar work, security, logistics, earned $100,000 to $200,000 per year. Same war, same danger, wildly different compensation. The modern pattern separated military service from financial gain. Roman legionaries expected to profit from conquest. Modern soldiers expect modest pay and thank yous for their service. The wealth flows elsewhere to corporations, shareholders, executives. In Rome, soldiers could become wealthy through the military system. In modern America, soldiers get by while the military-industrial complex generates billions. Different mechanism. Same outcome. The people fighting the wars don't capture the wealth the wars generate. Modern generals retire and join defense contractor boards. They go from public service salaries to private sector millions. Meanwhile, enlisted veterans struggle with unemployment, disability claims, and inadequate support systems. A 2019 study found that 9% of homeless adults in the United States are veterans. Nearly 1 million veterans have disability claims pending. But defense contractor CEOs earn 8-figure compensation packages. The Roman pattern evolved. It didn't disappear. Elites still profit from military systems. Ordinary soldiers still get modest pay and promises. And here's what's happening right now. As you watch this, military compensation debates continue. Should soldiers earn more? Should retirement benefits be protected? How do we balance recruiting needs with budget constraints? The arguments haven't changed. Conservatives say military spending is necessary for security. Progressives say soldiers deserve better pay and benefits. Contractors say they provide essential services. Veterans say they were promised more than they received. Meanwhile, the U.S. defense budget approaches $900 billion annually. Military personnel costs, pay, benefits, healthcare account for roughly $130 billion of that. Procurement and research, weapons, equipment, technology account for over $300 billion. More money goes to buying equipment than paying people. That ratio would be familiar to a Roman emperor. Weapons and logistics always cost more than soldiers. It's economically efficient to invest in force multipliers rather than human capital. But efficiency isn't fairness. The Roman system was efficient. It maintained the world's most effective military for centuries on relatively modest soldier pay. It worked economically until it didn't. When Rome could no longer expand and plunder dried up, the military became a pure expense rather than an investment. That's when the economic model broke. Modern militaries face similar questions. What happens when wars don't generate wealth? When military spending becomes pure cost? When veterans outnumber active duty and benefit obligations exceed capacity to pay? Rome's answer was collapse. Let's hope ours is different. So what should you take from this? First, understand that official compensation numbers rarely tell the whole story. Roman legionaries earned 225 denarii on paper, but kept 75 to 100 in cash. Modern soldiers earn salaries that look reasonable until you factor in the true cost of service-family separations, health impacts, opportunity costs of civilian careers foregone. Always look beyond the official numbers to see what people actually keep. Second, deferred compensation is a control mechanism, not generosity. Rome's retirement bonus locked soldiers into 25-year commitments. Modern military pensions do the same with 20-year requirements. It's not about rewarding service, though that's the rhetoric. It's about retaining personnel in a system where early departures would be costly. Deferred compensation benefits the institution more than the individual. If you're evaluating any job with heavy retirement benefits and minimal current pay, ask yourself, who does this structure actually serve? Third, pay inequality within systems reflects power structures, not performance differences. Roman centurions didn't work 50 times harder than legionaries. Modern generals don't work 20 times harder than privates. But they earn dramatically more because they control the system. Pay gaps reveal who has power and who doesn't. The largest gaps appear in hierarchical institutions, military corporations, governments, where those at the top determine compensation for those below. It's structural, not meritocratic. Understanding that changes how you evaluate your own economic position within any hierarchy. There's a deeper lesson here about human nature and economic systems. Roman soldiers weren't stupid. They knew they were being underpaid. They complained about it. Tacitus recorded their grievances. They mutinied over pay in 14 CE, when Augustus died. They knew the centurions earned far more. They knew the praetorians had it better. They knew the system was designed to extract maximum service for minimum cost. And yet, most of them served anyway. 25 years, did their jobs, fought Rome's wars. Because what else could they do? The alternatives were worse. And the retirement bonus was real. This is the tragedy of limited options. When your choices are subsistence, farming, urban poverty, or military service, you choose military service. Not because it's generous, because it's the least bad option. The Roman military didn't need to offer a great pay. It just needed to offer pay that was better than nothing. That's the minimum threshold for maintaining a labor force. Not fair compensation, not generous benefits. Just slightly better than the alternatives. Modern workers face similar calculations. Take a job with modest pay but benefits, or risk unemployment. Stay in a career with limited growth but stability. Or gamble on something uncertain. Most people choose the stable option. Not because it's optimal, because uncertainty is terrifying. The Roman legion understood this 20 centuries ago. Modern employers understand it today. Economic systems don't need to be fair. They just need to be slightly better than collapse. 225 denarii. After deductions, 75 to 100 in your purse. Enough for 1,000 loaves of bread. Or half a slave if you saved for 2 years. Or some wine, some clothes, and not much else. That was the economic reality for the men who built Rome's empire. Not heroes, not villains, just people trying to make a living in a system that paid them the minimum necessary to keep them loyal. The Roman military was the most successful fighting force in ancient history. It conquered 3 continents. It maintained an empire for centuries. And it did all of that while paying its soldiers wages that would make modern unions riot. That's not a testament to Roman generosity. It's a testament to Roman efficiency. They figured out the minimum compensation required to maintain a professional military. And they paid exactly that. Not a denarius more. The lesson isn't that soldiers should be grateful for what they get. The lesson is that every large organization will pay you the minimum necessary to retain you. That minimum varies based on alternatives available. But the principle doesn't change. If you want fair compensation, you need leverage. Skills, the market, values. Alternatives you can credibly threaten to pursue. Collective bargaining power, something that changes the equation. Because no institution pays more than it has to. Rome taught us that. And 2,000 years later, the lesson still holds. And if you think Roman soldier pay was revealing, wait until you see what Roman infrastructure actually cost and why modern governments can't build like Rome did anymore. That's a story of roads, aqueducts, and the true price of empire. We'll follow the construction budgets next. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. Past Chronicles has the answers. I'll show you where to look.